introduce the audience who may not be familiar with your work more broadly. This film touches on so many issues that we find in your nonfiction prose, and certainly for you as a scholar of Proust, these questions of memory, these questions of desire, these questions of place. Some of you may be familiar with the extraordinary memoir about leaving Alexandria, Egypt, the Jewish diaspora, the second Jewish diaspora from Egypt at that time, the extraordinary nonfiction prose works about place, and the number of novels that Professor Aciman has written. I wondered if you could just take a moment for our audience who may not be familiar with your oeuvre to just attempt to maybe situate in a sentence or two how you locate Call Me By Your Name with respect to the rest of your scholarly work and creative work as a novelist and prose writer.
You expect that there is a place for it in my entire oeuvre, as they say. There might be. I was born in Egypt, in Alexandria, and for those of you who know Alexandria, or know something about Alexandria, it's a place that's filled with contradictions. And contradictions have always been with me throughout my whole life. In my memoir called Out of Egypt, I wrote about growing up in the city, and I described the smells, the feel of summer on the skin, the taste of foods, the people, and the beautiful skin that some people have. And I wrote about all this, and I especially wrote about the beach. Every day in Alexandria during the summer, you go to the beach. And people have always told me that they couldn't understand how much I loved Alexandria, and so I must have lost something very important in my life. The irony is that I always hated the beach. I never liked the beach. I didn't like most of the foods they gave us. I disliked most of the people I met. I didn't like my family. My parents were always fighting, so it wasn't fun growing up with them. I'm that kind of person who tells you or lets you infer that he adores the things that he probably hates. So that was me. I say this because it gives you a sense of what it is to live with this yearning for the sea and at the same time feeling that you don't like it at all. And one of the things that I did with Call Me By Your Name was to invent a house that was located on the sea and where you would go to the beach as part of a daily ritual. You just went to the beach the way you would eat lunch, and you had friends and you played volleyball or tennis or you had a swimming pool. And these were all things that I avoided as a child. But I learned to like them on paper. And this is what I try to convey to my readers and to the people who saw the film, is that one can actually love things and not really sort of worship them, or conversely, one could long for them and at the same time avoid them. This kind of contradiction has been with me all my life, and it particularly plays out in this story about people, the people that I have met, that I have loved, that I have forgotten. I'm glad that I met them. I'm particularly glad that I've forgotten them. And when they show up, because now when you have a film like this, people from your past materialize, thinking that you'll be happy to see them. And you are, in fact, there's a part of you that feels, yeah, I could fall in love with you all over again. No, I don't think I could. So this is me. You're getting the real me right here. But I created this story because there was a point in my life where people meant so much to me, and it was so difficult to go out and reach out to them because I was tormented by contradiction, inhibition, shyness, a sort of tentativeness about everything I felt, not knowing whether what I felt was real or not. And that's one of the things that I try to convey in the scene when Elio wakes up the morning after they had sex. It's a moment in which most people recognize they never talk about it, but it's this feeling of, why did I do this last night? And many people feel this, but they'll never admit it. Oh, yes, it was terrific. No, it was not. And so I wanted to convey, how can you be in love with someone and at the same time be happy that you'll never see them again, and then moments later you take your bike and you go out and meet them again because you're dying to be with them again.
Well, that was a lovely discourse on that. But what one finds so much, apropos what you've just said, this element of loss and longing, and this element of desire that's so central in all of your works. It so happens that in this particular work, sexuality and coming of age and sexual awakening is central in that journey of understanding desire, understanding longing, understanding loss. And I'm wondering if you could say a bit more insofar as, given the fact that you write on these themes in other ways outside of sexuality, why sexuality and coming of age and sexual awakenings in this particular novel, given the fact that, again, other subjects have been your metaphor of longing, loss, desire, place, etc.? Why sexuality?
Why sexual? I have no idea. I mean, you're asking an impossible question. What I can say is that the only thing I will leave behind me when I'm gone, not from Stamford, I meant. No, the thing that I think is the most important about me, and I've always been embarrassed of it, is that I want. I write about wanting because I want things in life. I want people. I want place. I want to move elsewhere. I want so many things. And I've noticed that everything I wanted, whether it was for my childhood or for somebody I love and crave and want to touch, forget about love. I want to touch you. That sense, I mean, all these wants, they all are confluences of each other. They move in and out. So if I'm writing about Alexandria, people think that I want the place again, or my childhood. When I write Call Me By Your Name, they think that I want a man lover. And when I wrote a book called Eight White Nights, they think that I want a woman. But frankly, all I know about myself is that I want things, but this wanting is amorphous. It is fluid. It moves all the time, and I can never quite catch it. Writing, however, is a way of formalizing, of giving a form to that want and trying to arrest it far more than it is arrestable in real life.
Well, in that context, then these subjects of identity are so central to your work and certainly central to this particular novel and its adaptation. So we might think both in terms of the resistance to fixed notions of sexual identity as we might understand them, but also this very fluid sense of, well, as a Victorianist, what the 19th century would call Hebrew and Helene, right? These various themes of Jewish identity that recur through your works, and these various tropes of the classical world that are depicted very keenly in this adaptation, but are so very keenly part of your novel as well. So I'm wondering if you could say a little bit about the fluidity of identity, and perhaps, whether it deals with gender and sexuality on the one hand, or that real centrality of Jewish identity in so much of your prose.
I don't know that I have a Jewish identity in my prose, but I know that I'm supposed to be Jewish because I was born from Jewish parents, but I've never practiced Judaism. I don't know a single prayer, and I hate religions. Um, oh, uh, I haven't finished. Uh, the thing is that I envy people who have religion. I envy people who worship a nationality. I envy people who love the flag of their country. I envy you because I don't have that. But I don't envy you for more than 3 minutes, okay? In other words, you believe in this stuff? You actually go to this place on Saturdays or on Sundays thinking that somebody's listening up there? No. I don't believe in anything, but I'm going to come back to your issue. I am Jewish, but I've gone to more churches than I've gone to synagogues. In fact, I avoid synagogues because they're closer to me. So, and I was born Turkish. I became Italian. I spoke French at home and only French. And I went to British schools and American schools, and eventually I became an American citizen. What am I? I have no idea. In other words, my religions, my nationalities, my likes and dislikes are fluid. And my sexuality is the same exact way. It is fluid constantly. I can never, ever say that I have an identity. First of all, because the moment I will say I have an identity, I will hate it. So I don't subscribe to any identity. I don't even know who are the people I truly love, because that moves too. So there is absolutely no label you can attach to me. I mean, there might be one, but I don't know what it is. And I'm totally sort of without shape. But it also allows me to write the way I do, because writing in a way allows me to put down some kind of foundation. But then I call my books of essays, I call them false papers. In other words, anything I write down is absolutely shoddy and false. And then I wrote another book of essays, and I called it alibis. In other words, it's not true either. So I try to write about the things that matter most to me, and at the same time that I do that, I sort of disassemble them, and I sort of dismiss them. So there is absolutely no identity anywhere.
I'm sure that our audience is going to want to answer some questions, so I'll reserve myself for one last question before we open up to the audience. So this is, if I'm correct, your first work that has been adapted to film. Can you say something about the genre of film, or specifically the process of adaptation? Because I'm sure there might be some more specific questions about this adaptation that the audience may want to ask. But thoughts about adaptation for someone who comes to that which has come before and revisits it, makes it his own?
Um, when I heard, and it took many years, about 6 years, for people to actually begin rolling the camera to make the film. So there was a lot of producers. There was one producer, but there were many people who said yes and no as directors, actors, a whole litany of them. I can't even remember who they were. And I like these actors. But I had no idea that when I wrote the book, I had absolutely no plan, nor did I write it as a film. I just thought it wasn't going to happen, and I thought the film was going to last, a couple of weeks in some kind of obscure city, and then it was going to disappear. Because, first of all, I'm very humble. I think I am, though it takes a lot of arrogance to say you're humble, by the way. Uh, but essentially, I had no faith. So suddenly I see this film, and I saw it not in Sundance, where everybody went to see it. I just said, it's too cold. Who wants to go and see this movie anyway? I said, I'll see it later. But then I got all these amazing tweets. So I figured, okay, I'm going to go to Berlin to see it, which is where I went to see it finally, a month after everybody was raving about it. However, there are many things about, you mentioned the word adaptation, and it's become a very complex and querulous word, because it takes the story as it is, and some of the scenes are lifted word by word from the book itself, which should make an author very happy. But then there are moments where the director had to do things that only cinema can do, and that prose cannot do, and vice versa, of course. But I love the ending of the film. I always say this, and I love the moment when the credits begin to appear, because suddenly you realize, oh, you mean this is where it's going to end? And because you knew it was going to end, because of course the hours are ticking, and you know it's 2 hours already, but you watch this thing and suddenly you see the credits and you say, oh, that's so it's over. Their love affair is over. And you begin to feel something very powerful inside of you, and then you watch Timothy's face, and itself is already telling you there is pain, And at the same time, there's survival here. It's not just pain and I'm going to sob my way to death. He's not sobbing. There are moments when he's actually smiling. So by and large, I felt that the ending, and I told the director this, I said that the ending of the film is totally different from the ending of the novel. And yet it might be more powerful than the ending of the novel. And I said it's absolutely a work of art. And those 5 minutes or 4 minutes at the end are amazing. And you couldn't write this. You couldn't write boy staring at the fireplace, boy tearing up, boy smiling. Okay, you can't do it. But you can do it in a movie. And so he captured the finality of the relationship, of a relationship that is not dead.
As any of my students who are in the audience know, I would be extremely tempted to spend this entire time speaking to Professor Aciman, but that would be too greedy. So we must open it up, even as I must say I will come back.
Hi.
Hello.
I had another question for you, but since this discussion began, I'm quite intrigued by what you said in terms of that your words and your work is sort of what you long is sort of a depiction of what you long for in life and things that you may not necessarily feel. But looking at it, I imagine that you must be just as moved as one is when you interact with these characters and this story. And how do these stories affect you yourself? I mean, I imagine that writing this piece of work should affect your life and your parenting and your relationship with the world.
No, it's the other way around. It is exactly the other way around. Because of the person I am and the beliefs I have, because of the father I had, and because I have children, it is precisely because I know some things about such relations that I'm able to articulate and to put them in words. It's not the reverse. For you, it's the reverse because you read a book or you see a film and it hits you. For me, it's the other way around. I have that information sort of muddled in my head, and I need to put it in sort of coherent sentences. And where do I get this stuff from? I get it either from my past or my imagination. And the memory and imagination for me they are totally fluid. They flow into each other constantly, so that I don't know what I remember and what I imagined. But in effect, I am not as moved as people who read the books are, or people who see the film, because I was more working at the actual thing. I was manufacturing it. You are the recipient. So my feelings are there, but they're already sort of sublimated. Whereas in your case, you're experiencing sort of for the first time.
It took me about 2 years to realize why I liked Call Me By Your Name, your book especially. And in those 2 years, I finally realized that it had the same effect when I read Gaddafi's for the first time. And the thing about Gaddafi's, of course, is that he created a mythical Alexandria. And so when I read your book, I kind of felt that you created in some ways a mythical Liguria, and in some ways also a mythical Rome, because in 2014, for example, that was when I went to Rome, and I actually traced some of your, through the Via Corso and up to the bookstore. And of course, I always wondered whether the bookstore was really there.
It's no longer there. It was there in the mid-'80s.
I see. So the question really is this more of a mythical Italy? For you, especially, for example, in Enigma Variations, right? Where you created what I think is Puglia. I don't know exactly the place that you're referring to in southern Italy, in Enigma Variations, but I had the feeling it's somewhere in Puglia.
It doesn't matter. First of all, because I never name places. Most of the time, I almost never name places. Call Me By Your Name, the town is called B. That's partly because I couldn't make up my mind which of the many towns that started with B's it would be, so I just named it B. But I don't like specificity, the same way I don't like labels and sort of firmed up reality blocks. I don't like any of that stuff. It should remind you of Cavafy. Cavafy, of course, was lived in the same city where I was born, and you're right in saying that maybe I created a mythical Ligurian coast. And it has to be mythical. What's better than that? Otherwise, I would be a journalist, which is a totally different profession. You try to make it as mythical, maybe utopian, but at the same time, you capture human feelings as accurately as any anatomist of the soul would do, because that's the job. The rest are just factoids, and I have no patience with them. I get them most of the time wrong. For example, for those of you, how many of you have read the book, Call Me By Your Name? Okay, there are some facts that you should know. For example, they go to Rome, and in Rome they say on the first night that they never had sex again. Well, that's not possible. They have 3 more days in Rome. So it doesn't add up. This is something that a reader pointed out to me. Readers point out so many things. The other thing, when the father tells him, I could have had a relationship like that, blah, 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 and the son says, does mom know? I thought, and most people initially thought, what it means that, does mom know that I was sleeping with Oliver? And then somebody said, no, that's not at all what it means. I said, what could it mean? Does mom know that you were attracted to men? Oh, yeah, that means something too. So these kinds of details always escape me. I'm never good at them. And a good editor always catches them, but then the public catches them too. So you're right, it is a mythical Liguria. The way I wrote my Alexandria and Out of Egypt is mythical as well. And the town that you're describing in Enigma Variations is really in one of the islands of Sicily, on the Aeolian Islands, and I couldn't decide which one it would be, so I just didn't name it.
Can you comment on the rumor that I read recently that there's going to be a sequel to the movie, or at least a continuation following the last part of the novel where they reunite 20 years later?
You want me to tell you if there's going to be a sequel or not? A movie one? They all say there will be. The director says it. Timothée Chalamet does. Armie Hammer says it. Everybody's convinced. I've written the sequel, but nobody knows anything. So we're waiting. We're all sort of sitting there. Who's going to put their money on the table first? The author, the director, the producer holds the rights. So we don't know. We shall see.
Hello.
Where are you? I don't.
Oh, hi.
Oh, okay.
Oh, stand.
Okay.
Oh God, I wrote this down. Let's see. The book itself seems to be almost completely void of cynicism, and yet it takes place in the 1980s, which was fairly tumultuous for gay rights and everything. And that whole outside force of bigotry is like pretty much completely absent. Was that intentional?
Totally.
All right, cool.
Did you want me to write a novel where the gay kid gets all beaten up or killed or has repressive parents? And I mean, isn't that every gay story has that particular element sort of thrown into it? It reminds me of all the operas of the 19th century, or the good ones that we know and the very bad ones. There, as soon as you have a woman who has sort of fallen begin to cough, that means that she's going to die of tuberculosis. She's going to be finished. Essentially, these are the typical ways in which opera operates. And I didn't want to write such a novel. I wanted exactly to purify the air so that you can actually see what it is that a sort of gay relationship is. What is the beauty there? How powerful can it be? With no distractions from outside gazes. In fact, the outside gaze is the father's, and he is totally supportive. Oh, no parent is like that, but I get mail almost every day from people who say, I'm 80 years old, I'm 70 years old. I just wish my father had spoken to me that way. That never happened to me, and I wish it had. There are kids who read the book and say, I have used your book as an inspiration to come out to my parents. Oh, I think that's wonderful. It's because there is no, so that horrible monster that always accompanies any gay stories has been just dispelled, completely removed. And now you have to deal with the fact that it's a love story.
There is a brief reference
Thank you.
in your novel to the question of safe sex, which
Yes.
doesn't come up here. So there is the kind of invisibility in the adaptation about the tableau of AIDS in the background that's not completely invisible in your novel.
It's not completely, but I knew that basically in the mid-'80s there was an AIDS crisis. But I didn't want the lovers to discuss AIDS. And the way I had it done was Elio has already had sort of a reefer, he's smoking, his head is not entirely there. He says, did I tell you that I'm okay? Yes. And you told me that you're okay too? Yeah, fine. I told you that already, says Armie Oliver. But it was my way of saying, okay, I'm going to discuss it, but I'm not going to bring it up more than that way. Again, a lot of gay stories have the AIDS factor central, and it's a sort of a condemnation, either internally or externally, that is hovering on the story itself and defines the story. And I didn't want to be defined this way. That for me is actually boring, and I didn't want to be bored that way. I wanted to be, I wanted to be excited. I wanted to want what they wanted, and I fell in love with, Elio. I fell in love with Oliver. I fell in love with the father. I fell in love with the mother. The mother was a sort of meaningless character in the book, but I did fall in love with their love. I said, "What a beautiful story this is!" And oh, I wrote it. Oh, that's impossible.
I know there are many other questions. Can I just very briefly ask, though, could you speak to that question of gender in the novel, or the question of the female characters in the novel? And, granted, there's a gulf between the female characters in the novel and the adaptation's treatment of the female characters, but could you perhaps speak to gender in the novel in some way?
I didn't want to make, because I dislike labels of all sorts, I didn't want to have a character that only liked males and not women. I don't believe that. I don't think that's possible. I believe that one likes anything, all kinds of being, including trees or sheep, if you're into that sort of thing. But it's I think that there's a kind of universality in this act of desire, which I would like to call wanting. You want someone, you want somebody, and it might change in 5 minutes, but it's there. But I didn't want to limit the sexuality of my characters to being homo or hetero. I didn't want that.
I was actually thinking more in the sense of female agency, and so far as it's a very male novel, right? It's very much a novel about men, right?
Yes. Female agency, as in, the girl deciding.
Well, the mother, the cook, the various women who are in the novel. Just if you had any thoughts insofar as their
No, because I
development as
don't think in
characters.
those terms. In fact, I don't even like the word agency. but I don't think in those terms. Because my universe is not divided between men and women, and I think that the women I've grown up with and have sort of are very, very strong women, and the men tend to be very weak in comparison. So most of the decisions that have been made for me by my parents were made up by my mother, and though my father was a breadwinner, he never made decisions.
I know there were other hands up, and I have unfortunately silenced them.
Hi. I really want to thank you for the book and your writing. One of the things that comes through so much for me is the richness of the references, whether it's other novels, whether it's music, whether it's, food. It's just amazing. It's like a microcosm of the universe in terms of everything that you've synthesized. And so thank you for that, because it really stimulates me. I did want to ask, I mean, you brought up the idea of how different the ending of the novel is versus the ending of the movie. And I guess I just wanted to see if you could speak a little bit about what Oliver's internal relationship to Elio is once they part initially.
That's a very difficult question to answer, partly because I never understood Oliver. The character that is dominant, totally dominant, is Elio, and you see the whole universe through his eyes, not through Oliver's. In fact, he's attracted to Oliver because Oliver is exactly the opposite of who he is. Oliver is confident. Yes, he's a bit shy. He's confident. He makes friends easily. He sort of gets what he wants, whereas Elio is timid, tentative, reclusive, and all that sort of thing. So I don't know. I don't even understand how Oliver could have had a relationship so intense and at the same time decide to get married. So these are things that I don't understand. It's not that I totally don't understand them. I wrote them, so I had to be convinced that they were probable. But at the same time, I can't justify it. Many people write to me, and it's all over Facebook, that why don't I write the same novel from Oliver's perspective? Oliver would never write such a novel. He wouldn't want to write. He would basically write a lecture on a philosopher, but he wouldn't have the kind of the expansive feelings that Elio has. That's not Oliver. So if Oliver had to write this book, it would be 3 pages long.
Unless it was for a Tier 1 peer-reviewed journal, and it was going to be advancing his career with his book on Heraclitus.
Oh, exactly, yes. Well, he has a book on Heraclitus, that's true. Somebody had their hands up there. Yes.
Hi, I don't really have a question for you. I just wanted to really thank you for this novel. Oh, sorry. I don't really know if I really have a question for you. It's more I just want to thank you for this novel. It means a lot to me. I made the mistake of listening to the audiobook and finishing it before I came here, so this is probably not, so I'm a little teary than the movie. But I think one of the things that you managed to do so well is to touch on the nostalgia of first love. And like for me, when I read the book and I watch the movie, for me I remember my first love, and it brings back memories. But then yet as a parent, I hope I'm the parent like the father is in the book, and also and I think about how lucky my children are going to be because they haven't had their first love yet. And I know you said that you think the ending of the movie is maybe even better than the ending of the book, but meanwhile your book has the best last line of any book I've ever read. So I understand the ending's different because it's 20 years later. So if you guys do a sequel, is it going to stay somewhat true to that beauty that you have in describing the relationship as they move on and they're...
Well, you can't do the same thing again. That would be impossible. It would just be impossible.
Perhaps we have time for one more question. Then I guess I have the opportunity to ask you a question.
Sure.
I can't be the only person to have said the opposite of what you suggest, that I had rather than lacked a father like Professor Perlman. I can't be the first person to tell you that I had a father like Professor Perlman.
You had one.
I had a father like Professor Perlman.
No, people have said that.
They have said that.
They have said, but
Okay.
the people that really hit home are the people who tell me that their father died, they're very old, and they still lament the fact that their father never knew they were gay.
But I'm going to suggest to all of you that even as there's the opportunity to purchase a copy of this wonderful novel and have Professor Aciman sign that outside, that you also take a look at some of his other wonderful works, which are truly satisfying and as rich as this novel is. And we thank you for participating, and we thank
Thank you all.
Professor
Thank you so
Aciman.
much.
And we certainly thank as well the hospitality of the Avon, as well as all our support at the University of Connecticut.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. This is beautiful.